you were in a crash with a semi, your car's totaled, and you're hurt. And now the trucking company's already saying that you were at fault. Figuring out who's responsible for a semi-truck accident isn't always about what happened at the scene. It comes down to data, driver logs, safety violations, evidence that a lot of people don't know to even look for. I'm Chad Romey.
And I'm Chris Blackburn, and we've helped hundreds of Indiana clients uncover the truth behind these crashes, even when the police report gets it wrong. This video breaks down exactly what proves fault in a truck accident, and what to look for and what not. What to expect when the insurance company is denying the claim. Because if you don't act fast, the black box data, the maintenance records, the investigation could disappear.
So the most important question to look at when determining who's at fault for a trucking accident is what happened at the scene. So just right before and during and after the accident. And what you need to do if you're ever in one of these and you're capable of doing so after is get out and observe. So if you have the ability to take photographs, take photographs. If there are witnesses to the scene, don't just assume that the police officer who comes to the scene is going to write all their names down. Sometimes there are multiple witnesses who just simply are not referenced on the police report by an officer because sometimes, at least what I'm feeling, is that the police officer thinks that, well, gosh, everyone is saying the same thing, kind of, I'll just write a couple of them down and I won't get everybody. Well, there are a lot of different versions of stories, and you want to get all the names and numbers and contact information for each of those witnesses.
Some of the other evidence that is really crucial is the black box. So Chad mentioned using your cell phone. I mean, these things are going to be great from the perspective that you can just simply record video. That's going to capture a lot of things that you may forget about later on down the road, such as like the weather conditions, whether there was any skid marks, whether there's any broken glass, obviously just the damage to the vehicles themselves. But the black box, we've all heard about a black box. We hear about a lot on the news with airplanes and things like that. Vehicles today, especially semis, have black boxes, and it's very important to try to preserve that. So one of the best things you can do is hire an attorney who can send out a letter to preserve that evidence. We're kind of at a disadvantage because the trucking companies know about the black box, and they're skilled enough to know how to reset some parameters on there, such as hitting the brakes, I think 3 or 4 different times that resets things. But that black box information is going to be really, really crucial, where we can hire the experts who can then go inspect, download that data, and that data is going to tell us speed. It's going to tell us braking. It's going to give us a lot of information that we can use and the expert can use to reconstruct the accident. Outside of that, there's other data that we can get from onboard telemetrics. So these companies now use a lot of electronic data logging. They also have dash cam, which will have the speed. These are all things that we as attorneys that we can get through the course of representation with our clients. Yeah, so good data, good evidence that we can use to work on the evidence of the case.
There's also a lot of regulations that truck drivers and trucking companies have to abide by. So it's a pretty heavily regulated industry, mainly because there are vehicles out there that are thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds driving at 70 miles per hour amongst the rest of us. And so the government says, hey, we want to make sure that that's happening in as safest manner as possible. And so they have to abide by certain regulations and they have to keep track of all that. And so it's important to be able to determine whether that's happening or not. And you really do need some help in order to do that. But if for nothing else, you need to get information or a request to the trucking company or to their insurance company or both. Hey, you need to preserve this evidence so when the time comes, it's available for us to be able to look at to determine what happened before that accident.
Yeah, I'll touch on that real briefly. So when I say we're at a disadvantage, we really are. Our clients come to us, and by the time they come to us, it might be 30 days post-accident, 60 days post-accident. You yourself, if you're injured, the last thing you're thinking about is, oh, I need to send a letter to the trucking company to have them preserve their evidence, especially if you're really injured or catastrophically injured, or you've lost a loved one because of a severe accident. So that's where an attorney can come in and step in and fulfill that obligation for you right off the bat.
Yeah. Another component of determining who's at fault is, was the truck properly maintained? Yeah, and so obviously, again, with the severity of accidents that can be caused by trucks, just given their size, we want to make sure that they're in as safe condition as possible to be out on the road. I was involved in a case where, at first glance, it looked pretty clear who was at fault for the accident. The driver of the car pulled out in front of the truck and didn't give the truck driver a whole lot of time to react. The truck driver did react, but the truck didn't stop like it was supposed to. There were brakes, about 70% of the brakes were out of alignment, if you will. They were not up to grade. So when the truck started to slow down, it didn't slow down like it should have, but then some of the brakes on one side of the vehicle grabbed harder, and so it caused the truck to veer to the right, basically following the passenger car through the intersection, and it was a very serious impact and a deadly one. And so that was something that you would never know just by looking at the scene, the way the police report was written. The police officer would have no reason to know that the brakes were not up to grade, but they weren't. And the accident very, very likely would have been avoided if the brakes would have done what they needed to do that day. So, and that's something that you only find out if you do the investigation.
Yeah, I'll touch on that real quick too. Maintenance logs are going to be really crucial in these cases. Even, I mean, bigger corporations keep maintenance logs. Smaller mom and pop outfits usually don't. However, making sure that these trucks are safe and safe enough to travel on the roads of Indiana and other states, it's crucial. I could think of a case where my client was hit by a big corporation and their semi-tractor trailer, and the defendant claimed that his brakes were not working. They all of a sudden they stopped working. In that particular case, we hired an expert to reconstruct the accident. We also hired an expert to investigate and inspect the vehicle, and they ran tests and parameters on the brakes to basically negate the fact that the driver claimed that the brakes weren't working. But those are tools of resources that we have here at the firm to be able to get that information and to fight the insurance company from the get-go.
Yeah, a lot of times what you see and what happened in the case that I had referred to is they're doing maintenance checks, right? And so if there's anything obvious, they will address it. But if it's not an obvious defect in the truck, they're not going to address it. So they say, well, the brakes felt fine. Well, the brakes were fine under regular stopping circumstances, but none of them, or very few of them, were ready for emergency stopping. And they have to be ready for both. And so a lot of times if it is a company who's not doing what they should be doing, they're just saying, well, if a driver tells us something's wrong with the brakes, then we'll address it. But again, unless you're standing on the brakes, sometimes you don't know anything's wrong with them.
Yeah, and it's not just brakes. I mean, we're talking lights. These vehicles and trailers have a lot of lights. They require reflective tape. So maintaining the reflective tape, maintain the lights, obviously maintain the brakes that we talked about. These are all crucial things that federal standards require. And frankly, they're a reason that accidents happen because of their failure to maintain their vehicles.
Absolutely. So in Indiana, we have what's called comparative fault. All right. So what if, like I said, in the case that I had or that I was involved in, where the passenger car pulled out in front and the truck didn't slow down like it should have. Obviously, there's an argument that the passenger driver was at fault, or the passenger car driver was at fault. So explain comparative fault.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about comparative fault in these videos, and primarily because that we're fighting about who was at fault in a lot of our cases. Even in those rear-end accident cases, the defense will likely never admit liability, and when they do, they're doing that on the eve of trial. But comparative fault can basically be described as comparing the fault, the actions or inactions of everyone involved in a particular accident. So Chad's example where someone's failing to yield the right of way, the defense might argue that Our client should have been more aware, should have been paying attention. And because of that, they might have been able to stop or slow down to either avoid or maybe mitigate the accident. And so therefore they're a percentage at fault, maybe 10 or 15%. Ultimately, these are things that we argue about, but the jury gets to decide who gets what. And I look at it like you're taking this pie, there's 100 pieces, and the jury has to figure out, okay, the judge is given this pie with 100 pieces. We've got to figure out how much does the plaintiff get, how much does the defendant get. But it simply comes down to the actions or inactions of both the parties.
And if you are more than 50% at fault, if you're filing the claim and you're more than 50% at fault, you're going to lose. If you're and if you're less than 50% at fault, then let me say you win the case, but let's say you're 20% at fault and the jury verdict is for $100,000. You don't get to collect for your portion of the fault, so you wouldn't collect on $20,000 of that $100,000.
It's a unique concept, and sometimes it's hard to explain to our clients until you can actually physically show them a piece of paper, a document that breaks it down for them. We've tried lots of cases too where comparative fault comes into play, and your client looks back and says, "Well, why am I 10% at fault, or why is my verdict reduced 10%?" That's the law of comparative fault here in India.
And it's like throwing a dart at a dartboard to figure out what a jury's going to do with those. Sometimes there's an old saying that you're going to take 10 or 20% of the fault just for being there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you really did anything wrong or not, sometimes juries just say, "Well, gosh, you were there and maybe you shouldn't have been, and so we're going to give you some of the fault." So, how can an Indiana injury attorney help in a situation like a truck accident?
A lot. Trucking cases are extremely complicated, extremely difficult. But when it comes to preserving the evidence and getting that evidence quicker and in a more timely fashion, that's where Indiana lawyers like ourselves are going to be able to help you in those situations. First thing off the bat, what we'll do is we'll send out our letters of representation, and then we'll start orchestrating and scheduling vehicle inspections to get that black box data, to get the telemetrics from the companies like Qualcomm, anybody that were the trucking company may use. But that's going to be crucial. Time is of the essence, as we say, and contacting an attorney to help you with that couldn't be more crucial when it comes to a truck accident.
And getting the right letters and right in front of the right people to preserve that evidence. Also, we have access to experts. All right. So I'm not going to download this data. I'm not going to do the measurements on the truck. You want somebody who's going to be able to testify in front of a jury about what the measurements and the data download and all that means. And so we have the experts that are going to go and do that and preserve that in a way that we can then use later if we are ever in front of a judge and a jury, or frankly, just contest the case with the insurance company as you negotiate it.
Not only having access to the experts, but having the resources to be able to hire and retain the experts. These experts are very well educated. They're very well experienced. And because of that, they often are expensive, not only on the plaintiff side, but also on the defense side. So having the ability and the resources to pay for these experts is going to be crucial, because that's something that you shouldn't have to pay for up front.
Yeah, so not only should you not have to pay for it, but as you are looking for an attorney, if that's the course you go, you want to make sure the attorney can pay for it. And it sounds kind of odd, but sometimes you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars to get experts involved. And so you want to make sure that you're choosing a firm with the resources to pursue your claim like it should be, because sometimes these claims are worth, 7 or 8 figures. And so you want to have the ability to pony up at the front to preserve the evidence. So we talked about a lot of things here in regards to trucking accidents. There's a lot that goes into figuring out who's at fault for trucking accidents, what comparative fault is, what kind of data we need, what kind of photographs or videos or other evidence are important. But if you've just been in an accident with a truck, start writing down everything that you remember for purposes of litigation. And you write that at the top, because that way you and your lawyer are going to be able to talk about your thoughts in a way that's attorney-client privilege. Save your photos, get the police report, then call somebody that handles these types of cases. So, I mean, there are all sorts of lawyers out there that handle legal matters, but not all of them handle trucking cases. It is a very specific thing. You're looking for a lawyer with experience there. We're here to help you make sense of all of it. There are a lot of moving parts to this. We're going to fight for your rights and get you the results that you deserve, and hopefully back on the track to recovery, both physically and financially.
Yeah.
If you found this video helpful, check out our next video about dog bites in Indiana, the one bite rule. If you want to protect your rights and make sure that you're not leaving money on the table with the insurance company, that video breaks down how the one bite rule really works. Don't let a mistake cost you the settlement you deserve. See you over there.